The morning sun rose slowly over the fields of Vega 7, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Yuna stood by the window of the communications tower and watched the farmers begin their work. Some were human. Others were Telvari, tall insect-like creatures with 4 arms and gentle eyes. They worked side by side, planting seeds and carrying water. It was a peaceful sight, one that Yuna had grown to love in the 3 years since she arrived on this small colony world. Vega 7 was not an important planet. It had no great cities or valuable minerals. It was simply a farming world where humans and Telvari lived together in harmony. The Telvari had welcomed the human settlers with open arms. They shared their knowledge of the land, and the humans shared their technology. Together, they built a community that worked. Yuna turned back to her screens and checked the communication logs. Her job was simple but important. She monitored all signals coming in and going out of the colony. Most days were quiet. A message from a trading ship, a weather report from the satellite, news broadcasts from Earth. Nothing exciting ever happened on Vega 7. That morning started like any other. Yuna drank her tea and watched the data scroll across her monitors. Then, at exactly 900 hours, something changed. A small light blinked on her console. It was the long-range sensor, and it was detecting something unusual. She leaned forward and studied the readings. Ships, many ships. They were entering the system from the outer edge, moving fast. Yuna counted them quickly. 10, 20, 50. The number kept growing. Her heart began to beat faster. Trading convoys did not travel in such large numbers. She tried to identify the ships using the colony's database, but the computer found no match. These vessels were unknown. Yuna pressed the emergency button on her console. A sharp alarm rang through the communications tower. Within minutes, Sunwoo burst through the door. He was an old man with white hair and deep lines on his face. He had been a soldier once, many years ago, before he retired to this quiet colony. Now he served as the security chief, though there had never been any real threats to guard against. "What is it?" Sunwoo asked, his voice calm but alert. "Ships," Yuna said. "Many of them, I cannot identify them." Sunwoo moved to her side and looked at the screen. His eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. The ships were now close enough for the sensors to show their shapes. They were dark and angular, covered in sharp spines. They looked like weapons made to fly. "Get me a visual," Sunwoo ordered. Yuna activated the telescope camera and pointed it at the incoming fleet. The image that appeared on the screen made her blood run cold. The ships were massive, each one bristling with cannons and armor, and on their hulls she could see a symbol she recognized from old history lessons. 3 red slashes across a black circle. "The Krath," she whispered. Sunwoo's face went pale. The Krath Dominion was an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. They took what they wanted and killed or enslaved anyone who stood in their way. For centuries, they had stayed away from human space. No one knew exactly why. Some said there was an old agreement. Others said the Krath simply had no interest in Earth's region of the galaxy. But now they were here. "How many?" Sunwoo asked. 83 ships, Yuna replied. Her voice shook slightly. The colony had no warships. They had a small security force with basic weapons, nothing more. They could not fight 83 Krath warships. They could not even slow them down. Sunwoo stood very still for a long moment. Then he walked to a panel on the wall and opened it. Inside was an old console covered in dust. Yuna had never seen it used before. She did not even know what it was. "What is that?" she asked. "Something I hoped I would never need," Sunwoo said. He powered on the console and entered a long code from memory. The machine hummed to life. On its screen appeared words that Yuna did not understand. "Black Ember Protocol ready." Sunwoo placed his hand on a scanner. The machine accepted his identity. Then a single question appeared: "Confirm activation." "What does it do?" Yuna asked. Sunwoo looked at her with tired eyes. "It calls for help," he said, "the kind of help that changes everything." He pressed the button. Outside, the Krath fleet was entering orbit. Their first wave of landing ships was already descending toward the colony. Una could hear people screaming in the streets. The Telvari were running, their clicking voices filled with fear. Human families grabbed their children and tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The Krath soldiers hit the ground like a storm. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 eyes. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons cutting down anyone who resisted. Within an hour, they had taken control of the entire settlement. Yuna and Sunwoo were captured along with everyone else. The Krath forced them to kneel in the central square while their commander walked among them. He was larger than the others, wearing armor decorated with the skulls of alien species. "Humans," the commander said, his voice was deep and rough. "So soft, so weak, you will make good slaves." He laughed and ordered his soldiers to begin loading the prisoners onto transport ships. The Telvari wailed as they were separated from their families. Children cried for their parents. It was a scene of pure horror. But as Yuna was dragged toward the ships, she looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, a signal was racing across the stars. It was traveling faster than light, bouncing from relay station to relay station, crossing distances that would take normal ships years to travel. The signal reached the first station in 7 minutes, then the second, then the third. Across human space, old machines that had sat dormant for generations suddenly woke up. Lights flickered on in abandoned bases. Screens displayed the same 3 words, "Black Ember received." On Earth, deep beneath the mountains of a protected zone, a computer processed the signal and sent it onward. On Mars, a hidden facility began transmitting to every human military installation in existence. And in the cold darkness beyond the asteroid belt, inside a hollowed-out rock called the Cradle, an alarm began to sound. The humans of Vega 7 did not know it yet, but they had just changed the course of galactic history. They had sent a message that would wake a sleeping giant. They had called upon a power that the galaxy had forgotten. And somewhere in the endless black of space, that power was beginning to answer. Admiral Do-yun was eating his breakfast when the alarm changed his life forever. He was a man of 60 years, with gray hair cut short and a face marked by decades of service. For most of his career, he had trained soldiers, run simulations, and prepared for a war that everyone hoped would never come. Some called him paranoid. Others called him a relic of a violent past that humanity had left behind. Now, as the red lights flashed in his quarters aboard the Cradle, he knew that all those years of preparation had not been wasted. He walked quickly through the metal corridors of the station. The Cradle was humanity's greatest secret. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary asteroid drifting in the cold space beyond Mars. But inside, it held the command center for the Iron Vanguard fleet, a military force that officially did not exist. The war room was already filled with officers when Do-yun arrived. They stood at attention as he entered, their faces showing a mixture of fear and determination. On the main screen, 3 words glowed in bright red letters: "Black Ember ACTIVATED." "Report," Do-yun ordered. Minji stepped forward. She was young for her position, only 32 years old, but she had one of the sharpest minds in the fleet. Her job was to analyze threats and plan responses. She had studied the Krath Dominion for years, learning their tactics and weaknesses. Now all that knowledge would finally be put to use. "The signal came from Vega 7, Minji said. "A small agricultural colony near the border. Our sensors show 83 Krath warships in orbit. The colony has been captured. We estimate 3,000 human civilians and approximately 5,000 Telvari are now prisoners." The room went silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Krath had attacked a human world. They had taken human citizens as slaves. This was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was an act of war. Why Vega 7? Someone asked. It has nothing of value. They were testing us, Minji replied. The Krath wanted to see how we would respond. They believe humans are weak. They have watched our traders and diplomats for generations, and they think that is all we are. They have no idea what they have awakened. Do-yun walked to the center of the room and looked at the map displayed on the floor. It showed all of human space, hundreds of worlds connected by trade routes and communication lines. And hidden within that map were red dots, locations that appeared on no official records. These were the secret shipyards, the hidden bases, the places where humanity had been building its true military power for 300 years. Activate all Vanguard protocols, Do-yun said. Wake the fleet. Across human space, his order set things in motion that had been waiting for centuries. On a moon orbiting Jupiter, doors that had not opened in 200 years slowly slid apart. Inside was a shipyard carved from the rock itself, and within that shipyard sat 40 warships, their hulls gleaming under the lights. Crews who had trained their entire lives for this moment rushed to their stations. In the asteroid belt, mining ships that had spent decades pretending to gather ore revealed their true nature. Their cargo holds opened to show rows of missiles. Their communication arrays transformed into targeting systems. These were not miners. They were hunters. Near Saturn, a research station that studied the rings suddenly went dark. When it powered back on, it was no longer a research station. It was a military command post, coordinating the movement of dozens of stealth vessels that had been hiding among the ice and rock. And on Earth itself, in cities across every continent, certain people received coded messages on their private devices. These were veterans, retired soldiers who had kept their skills sharp and their secrets safe. They kissed their families goodbye and reported to hidden locations where transport ships were waiting. Hana stood beside Do-yun as the reports came flooding in. She was his second in command, a woman of quiet strength who had served with him for 20 years. She had helped design many of the strategies they would now use. She had also hoped, like everyone else, that they would never need them. Fleet strength is at 60% and rising, she reported. We can launch the main force within 18 hours. Make it 12, Do-yun said. Hana nodded and began issuing orders. Around them, the war room transformed into a hive of activity. Officers coordinated ship movements. Engineers checked weapon systems. Pilots ran final simulations. The sleeping giant of humanity's military was waking up, and it was angry. Minji approached Do-yun with a tablet in her hand. Admiral, I have completed my analysis of the Krath force at Vega 7. 83 ships is a large number, but their technology is inferior to ours. Their shields are weak against kinetic weapons. Their sensors cannot detect our stealth coding, and their tactics are rigid. They rely on numbers and fear to win battles. And what do they know about us? Do-yun asked. Minji allowed herself a small smile. Nothing that matters. They have seen our trading vessels and passenger ships. They think that is the best we can build. They have no idea that those ships were designed to look weak on purpose. This was the great secret of humanity's survival in a dangerous galaxy. For 300 years, humans had shown the universe a false face. They acted like peaceful traders and curious explorers. They signed treaties and made friends. They never showed their weapons or their warships. They let every other species believe that humans were harmless. But in the shadows they built. They prepared. They remembered the lessons of their own violent history. They knew that peace was precious, but it could only be protected by those who were ready for war. Now that readiness would be put to the test. Do-yun watched as the fleet numbers continued to climb on the display. 200 ships, 300, 400. The Iron Vanguard was assembling, pulling together from every corner of human space. It was the largest military force humanity had ever gathered, and the galaxy had no idea it even existed. Send a message to all ships, Do-yun ordered. His voice was steady, but inside his heart was pounding. Tell them that the time has come. Tell them that our people are suffering. Tell them that we do not start wars, but we finish them. Hana transmitted the message. Across the void, hundreds of captains heard their admiral's words. They checked their weapons, briefed their crews, and set their courses for Vega 7. In 12 hours, they would arrive. In 12 hours, the craft would learn why the ancient species of the galaxy had once fled from the light of Sol. In 12 hours, the universe would remember what humanity truly was. Not traders, not diplomats, not peaceful explorers. Warriors, protectors, avengers. The Krath had taken 3,000 humans and thought themselves powerful. They were about to discover that those 3,000 humans had 400 million brothers and sisters who would burn the galaxy to ash to bring them home. The sleeping giant had opened its eyes, and it was coming. Lord Veshin stood on the bridge of his flagship and smiled at the planet below. Vega 7 was a small prize, but it was only the beginning. The humans had fallen so easily, like grass before the wind. Their screams had been sweet music. Their tears had been the finest wine. Soon, he would take more of their worlds. Soon, he would build a slave empire that would make him the most powerful lord in the Krath Dominion. His officers moved around him, managing the fleet and organizing the prisoners. 83 warships held orbit around the planet, their weapons pointed at the surface in case anyone tried to resist. But there was no resistance. The humans had given up. They were broken. "My lord," one of his officers said, "the prisoners are ready for transport. We have separated the strong ones for labor and the weak ones for other uses. The insect creatures will be sold at the markets. They are worth less, but there are many of them." Veshin nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Begin loading them onto the slave ships. I want to leave this system within 2 days." "Should we leave a garrison on the planet, my lord?" Veshin laughed. The sound was harsh and cruel. "Why? Who would come to save them? The humans have no warriors. They are merchants and farmers, nothing more. We have nothing to fear from such a soft species." His officers laughed with him. They had all seen the pathetic resistance the humans had offered. A few security guards with small weapons, a handful of farmers with tools. The Krath had crushed them in minutes. These humans were no threat at all. Down on the surface, Yuna sat in a holding pen with hundreds of other prisoners. Her hands were bound with metal restraints and her face was dirty with dust and dried tears. Beside her, Sunwoo sat with his eyes closed, his breathing slow and steady. He looked like he was sleeping, but Yuna knew better. He was thinking, planning, waiting. "Do you think help will come?" she whispered to him. Sunwoo opened one eye and looked at her. "It will come," he said quietly. "But you must understand something, young one. What is coming is not rescue. It is not mercy. What I called down upon this place is something that humanity locked away long ago. It is something we hoped we would never need again." Yuna did not understand his words, but something in his voice made her shiver. In orbit, Lord Veshin was enjoying a meal when his sensor officer suddenly made a strange sound. It was a small noise, almost like a squeak of surprise. Veshin looked up with annoyance. "What is it?" he demanded. The officer's 4 eyes were wide with confusion. "My lord, I am detecting an energy surge at the edge of the system. It appears to be ships, many ships. They are coming out of faster-than-light travel." Veshin stood up slowly. "How many?" The officer was silent for a moment, checking his readings again and again. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. 412, my lord." The bridge went completely silent. 400 ships was an enormous number. Even the great fleets of the Krath Dominion rarely gathered such strength. Where had they come from? Who commanded them? "Identify the vessels," Veshin ordered. His voice was steady, but his hands had begun to shake. The officer worked his controls with trembling fingers. The images that appeared on the main screen made every Krath on the bridge step back in shock. The ships were huge. Their hulls were thick and dark, covered with armor that seemed to absorb the light. Their weapons were visible everywhere, rows upon rows of cannons and missile tubes and systems that the Krath computers could not even identify. These were not trading vessels. These were not exploration ships. These were machines built for one purpose and one purpose only: destruction. And on every single ship, painted in white against the dark metal, was the same symbol: a blue circle with a single star inside, the flag of the United Human Territories. Humans, one of the officers whispered. Those are human ships. Veshen's mind raced. This was impossible. Humans did not have warships. Humans were weak and peaceful. Everyone in the galaxy knew this. It was basic knowledge that children learned in school. But the evidence was right in front of him. 400 human warships, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything in his fleet. They were moving toward his position in perfect formation, their engines glowing with terrible purpose. Then the message came. Every screen on every Krath ship suddenly displayed the same image. A human male with gray hair and cold eyes stood on a bridge surrounded by officers. He wore a simple uniform with no decoration except for a single star on his collar. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. This is Admiral Doyon of the United Human Territories Iron Vanguard Fleet. You have attacked our colony. You have taken our people. You have committed an act of war against humanity. He paused, and when he continued, his voice dropped to a deadly whisper. You have made a terrible mistake. Surrender is no longer an option. We do not negotiate with slavers. We do not show mercy to those who hurt our families. We have come to take back what is ours, and we will not stop until every single one of our people is free. This is your only warning. Pray to whatever gods you believe in, because in 30 minutes we will begin your destruction. The transmission ended. Silence filled the Krath bridge. Then Lord Veshen did something that surprised even himself. He laughed. It was a nervous laugh filled with disbelief. Surely this was a bluff. Surely the humans were trying to scare him into retreating. They could not actually intend to fight. All ships battle formation, he ordered. Power up weapons. These humans think they can threaten the Krath Dominion. We will teach them the price of such foolishness. We have 83 ships of veteran warriors. They may have numbers, but we have experience. We have strength. We have the fury of the Krath. His officers cheered, their confidence restored by their commander's words. They moved to their stations and prepared for battle. The Krath fleet shifted into an attack formation, presenting a wall of weapons toward the approaching humans. On the surface of Vega 7, the prisoners looked up at the sky as the Krath guards began to run toward their ships. Yuna felt Sunwoo's hand grip her shoulder. "Watch," the old man said. "Watch and remember. What you are about to see is something that has not happened in 300 years. You are about to witness the true face of humanity." Above them, the stars began to move. The human fleet was closing in, a river of steel and fury flowing across the void. On every ship, soldiers checked their weapons. Pilots strapped into their fighters. Marines prepared for boarding actions. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. They were ready. On the bridge of the flagship Unyielding Wrath, Admiral Doyon stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Hana stood beside him, her face showing no emotion. Around them, the crew worked with perfect efficiency. "Admiral," Hana said, "the Krath fleet is forming up for battle. They do not appear to be retreating." Doyon nodded slowly. "Then they choose death. So be it. All ships, weapons free. Show them why the galaxy once feared the dark between stars." The Iron Vanguard fleet opened fire. The first shot from the human fleet traveled across the void in complete silence. It was a kinetic round, a solid piece of metal moving at incredible speed. It hit the lead Krath cruiser directly in the center of its hull. The shields that the Krath were so proud of, the shields that had stopped countless attacks from other species, flickered once and then failed. The round punched through the armor like it was made of paper and came out the other side. The ship broke in half and exploded. One shot, one kill. The battle had lasted exactly 4 seconds. Lord Veshin stared at his screen in horror. He had seen naval battles before. He had fought in wars against species that resisted the Krath with everything they had, but he had never seen anything like this. The human weapons were not just powerful. They were designed to kill ships. Every system, every component, every piece of their technology was focused on one goal: complete destruction. "Return fire," he screamed. "All ships return fire." The Krath fleet opened up with everything they had. Beams of energy and waves of missiles streamed toward the human formation. It should have been devastating. It should have torn the enemy apart. It did nothing. The human ships moved with impossible grace, sliding between the attacks like dancers, avoiding clumsy partners. Their dark hulls absorbed the energy weapons without any visible damage. Their point defense systems shot down the missiles before they could reach their targets. The Krath were throwing everything they had at an enemy they could not touch. And then the humans truly began a fight. Tihyun stood at his weapons console aboard the destroyer Silent Thunder, his hands moving across the controls with practiced speed. He was young, only 25 years old, but he had trained for combat since he was 16. Every day of simulation, every hour of study. It had all led to this moment. "Target lock on enemy cruiser," his captain announced. "Fire at will." Tihyun pressed the button. The Silent Thunder shuddered as its main cannon released a burst of kinetic rounds. Across the void, a Krath cruiser tried to dodge, but it was too slow. The rounds hit it in rapid succession, tearing through its hull and destroying its engine. The ship spun away, trailing fire and bodies. "Target destroyed," Tihyun reported. "Acquiring next target." Around the Silent Thunder, the other human destroyers were doing the same. They moved in groups of 3, covering each other and focusing their fire on one enemy at a time. The Krath ships fell one after another, unable to defend against tactics they had never seen before. In the center of the battle, the human battleships were even more terrifying. These massive vessels did not even bother to dodge. They simply flew forward, absorbing whatever fire the Krath could throw at them while unleashing storms of destruction. Their armor was too thick. Their weapons were too powerful. They were like giants walking through a field of insects. On the bridge of his flagship, Veshin watched his fleet being torn apart. In 30 minutes, he had lost 40 ships. 40 ships destroyed without a single human vessel taking serious damage. This was not a battle. This was an execution. "My lord," his tactical officer said desperately, "we must retreat. We cannot win this fight." "Retreat to where?" Veshin shouted. "They are faster than us. They will chase us down and destroy us." As if to prove his words, a group of human frigates appeared behind the Krath formation. They had somehow circled around during the chaos and were now cutting off the escape route. The Krath fleet was surrounded. Then the boarding ships came. Yunji stood in the launch bay of her assault carrier, surrounded by 200 of the finest Marines in the human military. They wore heavy armor colored black and gray, with no decorations except for their rank and unit numbers. Their weapons were heavy rifles designed for ship-to-ship combat. Their faces showed no fear. "Listen up," Yunji said, her voice carrying across the bay. "Our target is the Krath flagship. Intelligence says that Lord Veshin is aboard along with data on their slave operations. We are going to take that ship and capture that commander. We will face heavy resistance. We will take casualties, but we will not fail, because somewhere on that planet below us our people are waiting for us to save them, and we do not abandon our own." Her Marines slammed their fists against their chests in response. The sound echoed through the bay like thunder. "Launch," Yunji ordered. The boarding ships shot out of the carrier and raced toward the Krath flagship. Anti-aircraft fire tried to stop them, but the human ships were too fast and too well armored. They slammed into the hull of the enemy vessel and burned through with specialized cutting tools. Within seconds, airlocks opened and the Marines poured inside. The fighting inside the ship was brutal and quick. The Krath warriors were large and strong, but the humans were trained for this environment. They moved through the corridors in perfect formation, their weapons clearing every room. They fought in zero gravity like they were born in space. They used cover and angles that the Krath did not know existed. Yunji led her squad toward the bridge, stepping over fallen enemies without slowing down. A Krath warrior jumped out from behind a corner, swinging a blade at her head. She ducked under the attack, pressed her rifle against its chest, and fired. The warrior fell. She kept moving. Behind her, her soldiers were securing the ship section by section. Medical teams followed, treating the wounded and taking prisoners. They were efficient. They were professional. They were terrifying. On the bridge, Lord Veshin heard the fighting getting closer. His guards surrounded him, their weapons ready, but he could see the fear in their eyes. They knew they were going to die. The door exploded inward. Smoke filled the room. Through the haze, Veshin saw figures moving, too fast to track. His guards fired, but the humans were already among them, fighting hand to hand with a ferocity that froze his blood. Then Yunji was standing in front of him, her rifle pointed at his face. "Lord Veshin of the Krath Dominion," she said calmly, "you are under arrest for crimes against humanity. You will stand trial for your actions. If you resist, you will die. Choose now." Veshin looked at the bodies of his guards around him. He looked at the human soldiers standing over them, not even breathing hard. He thought about his 83 ships, now reduced to fewer than 20. He thought about the power and glory he had been so sure of just hours ago. He dropped his weapon and raised his hands. Outside, the battle was ending. The surviving Krath ships were surrendering, their crews too shocked to continue fighting. The human fleet moved among them, accepting their surrender and taking control of their vessels. On the surface of Vega 7, the prisoners watched the sky burn with falling debris. The Krath guards had fled or been captured. Human shuttles were descending, carrying soldiers and medics. Yuna felt the restraints fall from her wrists as a Marine cut them with a tool. "Are you hurt?" the soldier asked. Her voice was gentle despite her frightening appearance. Yuna shook her head, unable to speak. Tears were running down her face. Nearby, Sunwoo was standing up slowly, his old bones protesting. He watched the human soldiers moving through the camp, freeing prisoners and treating the wounded. A Telvari child ran to its parent, clicking with joy. A human family embraced, crying and laughing at the same time. The old veteran looked up at the sky, where the unyielding wrath hung like a guardian angel among the stars. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for remembering." The Battle of Vega 7 was over. Humanity had won, but the reckoning was only beginning. News of the battle at Vega 7 spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with access to communication networks heard the story. The Krath Dominion, the empire that had terrorized hundreds of worlds for thousands of years, had been defeated. Not just defeated, destroyed, humiliated, and the species that had done it was humanity. The recordings that leaked from the battle shocked everyone who saw them. Human ships moving at impossible speeds. Human weapons cutting through Krath armor like it did not exist. Human soldiers fighting with a cold efficiency that made even the most warlike species uncomfortable. This was not the humanity that the galaxy knew. This was something else entirely. Within days, the Krath Dominion withdrew all its fleets behind its borders. For the first time in recorded history, the great conquerors were hiding. Their emperor issued a statement calling for peace and promising that no Krath vessel would ever enter human space again. Some saw this as wisdom. Others saw it as terror. Ambassadors from dozens of species rushed to Earth, seeking meetings and treaties. They came from the Collective of Myra, the Tenvax Empire, the Free Worlds Alliance, and many others. They came with gifts and offers of friendship. They came because they were afraid. If humanity could do this to the Krath, what could they do to others? Admiral Doyon received the news of these diplomatic missions while still aboard the unyielding Wrath. He had not slept since the battle began, and his face showed every hour of exhaustion. But there was still work to be done. "The prisoners have been processed," Hana reported, standing beside him on the bridge. "Lord Veshin is being transported to Earth for trial. The other Krath officers will face charges as well. The slave ships have been captured, and we have freed over 8,000 beings from other species who were already in their holds." Doyon nodded slowly. "And our casualties?" 37 dead, 112 wounded, 3 ships damaged seriously enough to require shipyard repairs. Hana paused. It was the most one-sided naval battle in recorded galactic history. The admiral said nothing for a long moment. 37 families would receive visits from officers in dress uniform. 37 names would be added to the memorial walls. Those were not just numbers to him. They were his people, his responsibility. "The fleet performed beyond all expectations," he finally said. "Make sure everyone knows that I am proud of them, every single one of them." Hana nodded. "The Iron Vanguard is already beginning to disperse. Ships are returning to their hidden positions. Within 2 weeks, the fleet will be invisible again." This was always the plan. Humanity would show its power when necessary, then hide it once more. The galaxy would remember what they had seen, but they would not be able to find the ships or bases that made it possible. Humanity would return to being the peaceful traders and explorers that everyone expected. But now everyone would know the truth. Behind the smiles and handshakes, behind the trade deals and cultural exchanges, there was an iron fist, and it would strike without mercy if anyone dared to harm what humanity loved. On Vega 7, the rebuilding had already begun. Human engineers were repairing the damaged buildings. Medical teams were treating the injured. Counselors were helping people process the trauma of what they had experienced. Life was slowly returning to normal. Yuna had been offered a promotion and a transfer to a safer world. She turned it down. Her home was here, among the fields and the gentle Telvari and the community she had helped build. She would not run away from it just because bad things had happened. She walked through the settlement one morning, checking on the new communication systems being installed. Everything was being upgraded. Better sensors, stronger transmitters, emergency shelters. Vega 7 would never be caught unprepared again. Near the center of town, she found Sunwoo sitting on a bench watching workers construct a memorial. It would be a simple stone structure, listing the names of those who had died during the attack. Both human and Telvari names would be carved into it together. "How are you feeling?" Yuna asked, sitting down beside him. Sunwoo smiled tiredly. Old, relieved, sad. He shook his head. "I never wanted to use that beacon. I hoped I would die without ever having to send that signal. But when I saw our people being dragged away, when I heard the Telvari crying, I knew I had no choice." "You saved us," Yuna said. "I called down a terrible power upon this place," Sunwoo corrected her. "Do not mistake what happened for simple rescue. The Iron Vanguard is not a rescue fleet. It is a weapon of extinction. If the Krath had not surrendered when they did, every single one of their ships would have been destroyed. Every single crew member would have died. That is what humanity built. That is what I unleashed." Yuna thought about his words. She remembered the battle in the sky, the debris falling like burning rain, the terrible efficiency of the human attack. She understood what he was saying. "Then why?" she asked. "Why did we build such a thing if we hate using it?" Sunwoo was quiet for a long time before answering. "Because the galaxy is not a safe place. Because there are species like the Krath who prey on the weak. Because 300 years ago, humanity decided that it would never be prey. We would be peaceful. We would be kind. We would make friends and build relationships. But if anyone ever attacked our people, if anyone ever tried to enslave or destroy us, we would respond with such overwhelming force that no one would ever dare try again. He turned to look at her, his old eyes filled with complicated emotions. We do not want to be feared. We want to live in peace, but we will never, ever abandon our own. That is the promise that humanity made to itself. And yesterday we kept that promise. That evening, a Telvari elder came to visit Sunwoo at his home. The elder was old, even for their species, with faded colors on their shell and trembling antennae. They had been the leader of the Telvari community on Vega 7 before the attack. "I wish to understand," the elder said, their clicking voice soft with age. "Why did your people hide such power? You could rule this region of space with the force you have shown. You could take whatever you wanted, yet you pretended to be weak. Why?" Sunwoo poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to the elder. They sat together in his small garden, surrounded by flowers that were just beginning to bloom again after being trampled by Krath soldiers. "Because power is not the goal," Sunwoo said. "Humans have learned, through thousands of years of painful experience, that seeking power for its own sake leads only to destruction. We have fought terrible wars among ourselves. We have caused great suffering to our own kind. We do not wish to repeat those mistakes with others." He sipped his tea and looked up at the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, the last of the Iron Vanguard ships were disappearing into the void, returning to their hidden places. "We hide our strength because we do not want to use it. We pretend to be harmless because we want to be judged by our kindness, not feared for our weapons. We hope that by being good neighbors, by helping others and asking nothing in return, we could build a galaxy where such weapons were not needed." The elder considered this. "Yet you kept the weapons ready." "Yes," Sunwoo admitted, "because hope alone is not enough, because the universe is cruel and dangerous, because we love our families and our friends too much to leave them unprotected." He smiled sadly. "Humans are not dangerous because we are violent. We are dangerous because we care. We will destroy entire fleets to save a single child. We will burn empires to ashes to free our friends. That is what makes us terrifying." The Telvari elder was silent for a long moment. Then they bowed their head in a gesture of deep respect. "I understand now," they said, "and I am grateful, not just for the rescue but for the friendship your people have shown us. We will remember what humanity has done. We will tell our children and they will tell their children." Sunwoo returned the bow. "And we will remember you. You welcomed us to your world. You shared your knowledge and your kindness. When the darkness came, we stood together. That is what truly matters." Months passed. The galaxy slowly returned to its normal rhythms, though nothing was quite the same. The Krath Dominion never recovered from its defeat. Species that had once been their victims now pushed back, reclaiming lost territory and freeing enslaved populations. The balance of power was shifting. And at the center of human space, in hidden bases and secret shipyards, the Iron Vanguard fleet waited in silence. Its crews trained. Its weapons were maintained. Its computers ran simulations of every possible threat. They were ready. Because humanity knew the truth. Peace was not the absence of war. Peace was what happened when those who loved it were strong enough to defend it. The galaxy had forgotten that lesson. Now they remembered. And they would never forget again.